Okay, welcome everybody. This is our final masterclass of today. This is Disrupting the Norm and why your workforce needs to reflect the diversity of society.
Yeah, we're not sure who Norm is, but let's disrupt them anyway. Right, so who are we? Well, we are two co-founders in CAPSLOCK, myself and Lorna. Lorna always goes first to introduce herself, so off you go.
Okay, well, how can I not then now? So my name's Lorna Armitage. I'm one of the co-founders at CAPSLOCK. Very quickly, my background is in both education. So I worked as a senior academic alongside Andrea for many years in computer science and cybersecurity, but also worked for over 20 years now as a consultant in cybersecurity, consulting to both the public and private sector.
Yeah, there is a reason why I go second, and that is so I can just say, and me also. Other than I'm not called Lorna, I'm called Andrea, but the rest you can pretty much say applies to me too.
Andrea's like me, just better.
Right, okay, so diversity drives productivity. I think this is quite an interesting slide in that it gives us a little bit of an insight into where we are currently in the UK. Not an incredibly rosy picture. But disengaged employees cost the UK between 52 and 78 billion per year in lost productivity. I mean, that's massive. There's a real reason why this is important in this context is because a diverse workforce, a diversity in the workplace absolutely increases and improves productivity. So it's kind of a key driver for doing things better. I think equally alongside that, 83% of the UK workforce is either disengaged or ambivalent about their job and or company. That's the majority of people who are working today do not care a lot about what they're doing. We're ranked 18th out of 20 countries in terms of employee engagement, which is not a great place to be. I think the key thing really is that we keep doing the same things and expecting or wanting a different outcome. And this is really how can we start to look at things in a different way and perhaps start to do things that little bit better.
Yeah, in terms of productivity as well, it's fallen in the last few years down to what it used to be around 2007. And actually what you find is there's a real positive correlation between satisfied customers and engaged, happy staff. And that's important because actually one of the ways that you get satisfied customers is having that diversity throughout your workplace, not just diversity in terms of gender, in terms of race and things like that. It's a diversity of thought as well across the whole of the workplace, because it's really essential that a company's workforce actually reflects their customer base, and your customer base is society in essence. So we need that in the business as well. And there is that strong link between engaged staff and diverse workforce, as Andrea said. And you know, it's not just about compliance. Diversity, you know, is important from a business perspective as well, and having a successful business and going forward with that. I think in terms of diversity and inclusion, we're going to start with what it isn't. And I really, really like this diagram here around equality and equity, because we talk about equity a lot, you know, and actually how that should, we talk about equality a lot and what that looks like. And actually equality isn't just giving everybody the same thing. It's not just looking and saying we should treat everybody the same, because not everybody comes from the same background. So not everybody's had the same opportunities in life. Actually, what we should be looking for is equity. And actually looking and saying, what can we do to give this person opportunities to move forward, to make sure that they've got the same opportunity as other people as well. So it's not just about that. It's not about letting everybody in the room speak always either as well. It's actually sometimes recognising that some people need to speak a little bit less, actually, and that person needs to speak a little bit more to be heard in the room there as well. It's not ticking a box, although that is what a lot of organisations do, but that's not just what it's about. But it's making sure that there are individuals from all minority groups, and not just making sure that, or making sure that you mandate diversity training. And I'm sure we've all had that training where you just click through until it's done, and then, okay, that box is ticked. We've all done diversity training, therefore we all must be fantastic in this organisation.
Yeah, always good to start with what it's not. Guess then looking to what does it mean? What does it mean in reality then? It means listening at the planning stage, listening at the start, not just at the delivery or execution phase, but actually making sure there's that input of every voice into the design of whatever it is you're doing. It means creating equality of opportunity. a bit when you look at the last graphic around, that person needs 2 boxes, that person doesn't need a box at all. They're not being given the same thing, but their opportunity to watch the game suddenly becomes the same. It's listening to everybody in the room when they speak, actually, no matter whether you agree with that voice or whether you don't. It's actually actively listening. It's making sure you're creating those opportunities to hear what everybody has to say. And I think this is important, actually. It might be that we don't know what the women in our room, our office think. They never say anything. Well, what's our responsibility to that? Our responsibility is creating an opportunity where we can hear everybody, where everybody feels they're able to say and have input. It's looking at being open, having a culture that means it's okay to call things out. It's okay to tell people when it's not done in the way it should be done. And equally okay to praise people for doing a great job as well.
Yeah, I think that culture is really, really important there, and having that calling out. But I think it's also definitely leading from the top. It always comes from the top. You've got to, practice what you preach there. But I think as well as that, as well, it's looking around the room and actually looking and saying what voices are missing from this room here. Whose voices are we not hearing in this, especially when you're in a room where you're making decisions that affect the other people and the other workforce. So, looking at that, and for us at CAPSLOCK, that's really important. We tick a lot of boxes on diversity, actually. We're women, for a start. We're gay women. Andrea has a disability. That's another box ticked. Is there any more boxes we can tick? So
there's one for being tall, maybe, or short with little feet. I'm not sure, but let's see. Let's check the boxes.
Yeah,
in a
but
minute
and actually, I'm saying that flippantly, but actually, so we might tick a lot of boxes, but there's a lot that we don't tick as well. So it's not just our voices that should be heard. We are also white women, so we have white privilege as well. We don't understand what it's like not to be white. We don't understand the same struggles that other people go through and different people. And actually, it's really important that we hear those voices as well when we're making decisions that impact lives and other people.
I think for most organisations and probably individuals, there's a real focus on what equality means in terms of the law. So we focus on some key characteristics, and often these are the protected characteristics in any business. So we say these are the things we must do or we must be seen to be doing to be compliant. So as I said, certain protected characteristics, things around race, ethnicity and disability, pregnancy. This is the way quite often we silo people. So that person is black, or that person is of that age group, or that person is a gay person, that person is a man or a woman. We tend to focus on protected characteristics, but often it's not a positive thing. Quite often it's a way to see difference and to actually segregate people and say, actually, we've got these protected characteristics, we've got a box for them, let's put them in that box, along with all the other people who are, and fill in the blank.
Yeah. And what that does is it can foster a bit of a negative sort of thought process around it as well. It makes it feel like it's difficult, it's unachievable. Oh, we got to do this, we got to tick that box. So it's not a positive way of looking at it.
I think on top of that, actually, do you know what? Before I understood what unconscious bias was about, I used to really pride myself on not being a judgmental person. It was like, I accept everybody, I've got no isms or ists or things like that. And then I came across unconscious bias, and it was like somebody had slapped me across the face with it. It's a bit like I didn't know it existed, and this explains the bit of me that keeps getting it wrong. The bit of my learned behaviours that would say, okay, it's okay to think that way because that's kind of an unconscious bias. You're not even aware you're doing it. So I guess unconscious bias at the heart of it is that we tend to like people who are like us. We tend to like to be around people we relate to very easily. We tend to like to be around people we connect with easily. And actually, when you look at our bias goes towards people like us and away from that difference. So if somebody's got an accent we don't recognise, or they don't look the same as us, or they don't wear the same clothes, or seem to have the same background, inadvertently, we're not as positive towards those people as we are towards the people who are just like us. Yeah. And it's something we all carry. I think the best thing, I'm going to say you opened your mouth and some idiot speak. I meant me. It's something we all carry, and I think actually being aware it's okay to carry it, but being aware that you can challenge it is really important.
I think that's key, really. You know, we all have prejudices. We don't like to admit it, but we do. We have learned behaviours that comes from our backgrounds, from our upbringing, all of that stuff. And I think having the prejudices is not the issue. It's not recognising those and actively not behaving and making decisions based on those. And I think some people take that as a criticism, and it's not. It's just being human. You know, we could go into the whole psychology of humans and being in packs and all of that. But you know, it's actually just understanding that is a thing. Learned behaviours are a thing, and actually it's okay to accept that and use it in a positive way to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we take ourselves away a little bit from the box ticking law version of what diversity looks like, we start to see all the characteristics we have and all the different ways we might be the same or different from people around us. We're diverse in so many different ways than just the protected characteristics we speak about. So we perhaps all have different types of education, background and upbringing. We might speak different languages or have different regional accents. As you can probably tell, myself and Lorna speak properly. Sometimes,
from God's own country.
Sometimes people don't speak as properly as we do, but, you know, we're okay with that. So I think there are lots of ways to be similar, but lots of ways to be different. And I think if we take ourselves away from kind of focusing negatively on having to tick a box, we start to embrace positively all the difference that people can bring into a workplace.
Absolutely. Why do we look at all this negatively? Why isn't this not a positive thing? It really creates diversity of thought. It creates innovation. You know, it's literally this whole kind of diversity of human beings and where they come from that has drived society forward. So, you know, I think seeing it as a negative is just nonsensical from a human level, but from a business perspective, absolutely, because it actually stifles business innovation as well.
I think the one that I find personally difficult is probably political opinion. That's always a contentious one, isn't it? But it's still good to have that debate. So yeah, it's absolutely a positive way to look at things. So why does it matter in practice? I guess for a number of different reasons. Diverse workforces outperform those that are not diverse. That is just fact. There is study after study that will say if you've got a workforce that has a lot of diversity, actually it's more impactful, it is more productive, and the output is better. It just is how it is. I think champion diversity helps attract talent and secure scarce resource. So if you work in an environment that is difficult to attract people, perhaps like we do, you work in cyber and there's a scarcity of resource, making sure that you're championing diversity helps bring people in. Actually, it's seen to be a workforce and an environment where people want to work.
Yeah, as we've already said, diversity helps to keep clients and customers happy, which obviously has a correlation then with how your workforce feel and how happy they are. But it promotes that creativity and that diversity of thought as well. And motivated and productive teams are more impactful. They're more productive in the long run, and just, you know, businesses are just more successful.
So this versus the other one. I guess if you look at one, it kind of speaks of the other. But different talents and experience and skill leads to creative solutions. You can imagine if we're all addressing the same problem, dependent on our background, we might come up with a very, very different solution. And actually having that creativity in the room is really, really beneficial. It leads to a richer experience. It leads to innovation. And it means that people in the workforce really have a much more positive outlook. They don't always consider that the way to solve something is just their way. Actually, they appreciate there are different ways to do the same thing. Yeah.
When you're looking at critical thinking, that is developed through challenge and through difference, you know, being challenged. And, you know, I think we sort of pride ourselves within CAPSLOCK on our culture in the business and that positive culture. As Andrew said earlier, being able to call people out, but also having a really kind of open and supportive workplace where we can challenge each other. We can talk through decision making, you know, irrelevant of where you sit in the business. We can have those conversations and challenge that, you know, and actually it is fantastic. It's difficult on a human level at first, when somebody challenges you, because you think, well, that's my idea and that's brilliant. Well, I want to do that. But actually, when you sit back and you think about it, and it's like, oh, actually, I can see what they mean there. That might work better. So it does really create that innovation.
Sorry, Lorna. It's quite liberating, actually, not to be the font of all knowledge, to actually be able to pass that over and see that other people have brilliant and better ideas than you do at times.
I've never had that problem.
Yeah, to be honest, in terms of a learning style, obviously, as a day job, we're in the classroom looking at upskilling people, and as a day job, this is how our learning methodologies work as well, around critical thinking, around comprehensive solutions. It's all really about bringing difference into one space.
Absolutely. And how can you represent, as a company, especially as a cyber company, looking at cyber solutions, you're looking at clients and how you can have solutions for those, and and how that might work. The clients that you have there are reflective of society, and if you've not got a workforce that reflects that and has that diversity, how can you possibly come up with those creative and innovative solutions that the client needs? It just doesn't work.
So cyber does need diversity, and I think it's probably one of, not the most, what's the opposite of diverse? I can only think of undiverse, and I don't think that's the word, but it lacks diversity. 15% of the workforce in cyber are women, but on the flip side, roles are difficult to fill and retention is poor. So why is that the case? And why are we not looking more broadly at who might want to do these types of roles? I think media representation isn't inclusive. If you think of anybody who does perhaps even ethical hacking as a role, you've got a picture of perhaps a white young man in a hoodie. It's not really an inclusive image that people see themselves in.
Yeah, nor is it representative of what the cyber sector is at all.
I think there are a few women role models. I know people who've come to work with us simply because we are women in the business and we're visible. And actually that's quite nice for people to be able to come in and decide to work with us just because we are that little bit more diverse. So I think women role models are important. I think the other thing, currently women are just paid less. It is just fact.
Yeah.
So why change? I think it's to combat different and emerging threats, given that, as Lorna said, solutions need to represent society. So solutions that are diverse are very much better than those that are not. I think good security leads to good business. And if you've got a diverse workforce, it's much, much better than one that's siloed.
Yeah, recruiting into the unfilled positions, there's a cybersecurity gap. There's a skills gap there, and actually we're not tapping into. If we even just looking at gender, we're not tapping into 50% of the population there fully. So even just to fill more roles, and then actually you take that outside of just gender, there is so much more potential out there that we're just not tapping into at the moment.
We sound like one of those adverts, when there was that war movement to get women in the land army. Because all the men were not around. I think it's a little like that. It's not seen as a place for them. How do you make it more attractive? I think, interestingly, women in the sector are more educated. That's an interesting one, isn't it? 44% of men versus 52% of women have postgraduate qualifications. I've got
my own thoughts on why that is.
But yeah, it just is how it is. It's a stat. Take from it what you will. That is the way it currently is. I think in terms of how we do things differently, it's identifying and removing any barriers we can. So once we see a barrier in place, how do we remove it and make the sector more accessible? How do we celebrate role models and help raise their profiles? So rather than think it's competition, how do we actually look at making that diversity much more visible?
Yeah, I think looking at language is really important, behaviour, environments. But, for me, especially in a sector like cyber, it's really important. There's so many acronyms, there's so much language that's not understandable, that people can't relate to, that it makes it sound so overcomplicated, makes them feel like, well, I couldn't possibly do that. I don't even understand what that means. How could I possibly do that? I think for us, I remember when we first looked at CAPSLOCK and founded CAPSLOCK, and looked at our social media presence, our marketing, and Annabelle, who joined us as a founding employee, one of the first conversations we had was about the language that we put out, making sure that it's not language that's inaccessible to people, looking at the colours, looking at the whole branding on how we portrayed ourselves and how we spoke to people as a business. But it's also the behaviour, and that behaviour comes from the top. It has to come from the top, but making sure that you maintain that culture as well throughout a business, and making sure it's an environment where people do feel supported and able to speak up as well, and just making sure that environment is a supportive environment, and listening to people, actually listening. And I think as I said earlier, actually not only listening, but then also identifying who am I not listening to? What voices are not being heard here? Which voices do I need to listen to?
We've got to that really strange part of the day, when you don't know whether it's a bit like having more than one kid. You tell one child something 5 times and forget you've not told the other 5 anything at all. I think we've done 6 different talks today, and I don't know what was said 6 times and what we haven't actually shared. But anyway, hopefully some of that made sense. I'm getting a little delirious, apologies. Right, so by way of a last slide, in summary, it matters. Diversity definitely matters. It reflects society. And this is what the workplace should look like. It should look like a reflection of what general society is. We makes us produce more solutions that are much more robust and better fit for purpose. Workforces are happier. It just is how it is. Diverse places are happier than ones that are not. And we're more productive. If we think back to slide 1 around how unproductive the UK is, diverse workforces simply do better at being much more productive. Yeah. I think if all that doesn't make sense, then it's simply the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, just on the last note, and I've definitely said this before, and if actually you're not doing it on a human level because it's the right thing to do, from a business perspective, it makes sense because it makes the business more successful. So for any other reason, none of the others work, just do it for that. You're going to have a successful business.